Hello, hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of Skeptics and Seekers Sunday Sermon. This is your host, David Johnson, and today is final, um, the final recording, the final entry into the Apologetics series, a series I very much enjoyed. Now, we did the final apologetic last week. I did tease that I would do a few weeks of counter apologetics, but my schedule, it looks like, is not going to allow me to do that. So what you should do is go back to the boards and read the write-ups that I have done. I've done an apologetic of doubt, which is something that I've developed. Also, an apologetic from bullshit, which is also something that obviously I have developed. And a couple of more. I don't know if I did hiddenness, but if I didn't, assume that I meant to or might write something up on hiddenness. But I figure if I can only do 1 week of counter apologetics, it's going to be on suffering. It's maybe the oldest one out there. I mean, the book of Job is basically the counter apologetic from suffering. That's really what it is. It's the oldest book in the Bible. And so today we're going to tackle suffering. There are lots of points in suffering that we're not going to cover today. This is a very short video. And so we're just going to deal with this. But in the write-up on suffering, I cover quite a few more aspects of it. The thing is, this brief video, it's enough. It's enough. I will simply, there's enough in here so that I can point out quite a few things and explain to you why, even if there is some aspect of the argument from suffering, this theodicy, if there's some aspect of it that is not covered either here or in my write-up, and something new comes up that you have not heard, it's very easy to debunk. It's one of the most debunkable. I say debunkable. It's one of the better, one of the easier counter apologetics to defend. And when Christians offer a rebuttal, it's easy to rebut the rebuttals. And so it gets a little bit meta, I suppose, when we start talking about counter apologetics and counters and counters to the counters to the counters. And so that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to jump right into it, and let's see if we can do this one pretty quick.
I went through 8 years of Catholic school, Sisters of Charity, and I got professional religious education throughout all those 8 years. Then I had 4 years of Jesuit prep school, and at the end of 12 years of religious education, I was an atheist. And then I came to Columbia. The sticking point in all that regarding religion for me was the Holocaust. I looked at that and I said, how is it possible that 6 million people could be exterminated in the course of a war that took 80 million lives, and there could be a God? How do you answer that question?
I'm going to push back and ask you, there sounds like there's two motives behind the question.
Okay, so I'm just going to have to pause right there. David has asked a pretty common question, a very reasonable question. It's an easy to understand question. It's one of those questions that Christians hate to deal with. And Tim Keller here is already dodging. Now, I don't dislike Tim Keller, but I think I dislike him a little bit more after this video than I have in the past. So we get ready for the old dodge. This is really kind of let's deflect for a little bit. Let's think while I'm deflecting and until I can come up with some kind of rejoinder. And so he's giving some pushback Why? We haven't even gotten started. We just asked one question. Well, I'm going to push back and challenge the motives. What are you talking about? The motives? It's a question. And so what he's going to do next is just break it down into a couple of parts, one of which is obviously not what is being asked, and the other one is. And so when he finally gets around to it and he's wasted enough time on the juke here that doesn't work, we'll get into his actual response.
Both true for you. They're both very important questions. One is how could European civilization, which is based on Christianity for 1,000 years, produce something like that? Or was it much more general, and that is, how in the world could God allow that kind of evil and suffering?
That's the question I want.
The second one.
Yeah, the second
Yeah.
one. Much more interesting.
Well, the first one is a terrible question too. I mean, it's a terrible question to answer for a Christian minister. But as a pastor, I have to say that the Holocaust is awful, and yet as a pastor for the last 35 years, I've been sitting in rooms with people, as a pastor, with parents whose little, 2-year-old get run over by a car. I mean, it doesn't seem like a Holocaust, but it's the same kind of misery, the same question. Right. Why in the world would God allow evil and suffering? So
hang on. I gotta stop you there, Tim. It's not the same question. So he took a while. He did a little feint to the left. Finally got pulled back to the question. Yeah, I know you would have really rather dealt with the question that you asked instead of the one that he asked. And you're going to try to do that here. And you're going to partially get away with it, except I'm not going to let you get away with it. This is just a tactic. And when you have dealt with as many Christians who dodge as much as I have, you get pretty good at dodgeball. You get pretty good at recognizing the tactics. And so this is a particularly egregious one, and I want to help you see it too, so that the next time you watch one of these debates or discussions, you'll be able to recognize it when it happens, especially when you're in the discussion. So remember, the question is about the Holocaust. You can you can say to yourself, well, that's not a good example. It's not a really good question, but it's a clear question. It's easy to understand what is meant, and it's obvious that Keller does not want to answer it. And so he is doing a maneuver that I'll give him credit for. Well done. It's good. Some of you probably still haven't seen it. Let me point it out. He says, the Holocaust, terrible thing. But you know what? A mother who loses a child, sitting across from me in my office, that's also a terrible thing. So suffering is suffering. And so same thing. That's how he does it. That's what he does. So instead of dealing with the question of the Holocaust, he gives a false equivalency, says same thing, and then answers the question he'd rather answer. So let me just say that I do agree. Suffering is bad, whether it's 6 million and their associated families or one individual. Suffering's not good at any level, on any scale. But let us not pretend that a mother who loses their child from SIDS is the same thing as 6 million Jews being intentionally massacred in a type of ethnic cleansing. It is not the same thing. It's not even close to the same thing. And to watch this attempt is so dishonest. I am not saying this to try to diminish the suffering of the mother who loses her child. But we're not talking about that. This mother shouldn't have even been dragged into this. This is Tim Keller picking up the goalpost and putting it on a skateboard and taking off down the field. Do not let him or anyone in his position get away with this maneuver. And with this, he answers a very different question. It's a pastoral question. That's the one that he's answering. That's the one he feels comfortable with answering. He's not talking about a general genocidal level suffering event. He's talking about a simple pastoral question. Let's see where he goes.
Been through it and through it and through it and through it. The right response to anyone who's actually in the middle of suffering is silence and love and speaking when spoken to. Answers I've given to people over the years when they've asked me. The one is, I actually don't believe it makes it any easier to handle or face suffering by disbelieving in God. And I actually do.
And with this, we're going to see the table turning effort. You might call this any number of things. Sojourn man is one way that you could classify the argument that he's going to shift too much he's going to shift to at this point, and he's going to try to shift the burden onto his interlocutor. And the way he's going to do that is to say, hey, you got the same problem. Now, sometimes, the reason I'm going to jump ahead of this, sometimes that is the right answer. Sometimes the question being asked is an illegitimate question. And a way of showing that it's an illegitimate question is to point out that you are asking a universal question that is, or pointing out a universal problem that is the same for everyone. And so whether I have an answer or not, we are in the same boat. You're asking a question where no one has an answer. And so you're just pretending that you have an answer because I don't. All right. I think it's fair to point that out. That is not the situation here, though. We will talk about this at the end because it's going to come back. This is really his move. He's finally landing on a way of dealing with this problem in this conversation. And the answer he gives to this problem is Sojourn man.
Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail. He says, how do you know that a human deed is unjust or a law? But he's talking about love. How do you know a human law or deed is unjust? Only if there's a higher law that says it's unjust.
Okay. I'm going to just chase this particular rabbit as he is turning, dodging, deflecting. And so now we need to deal with this false trail to objectivity. All right. So it's just like the moral argument. You can't know what's good. You can't know if anything is bad. You don't get the right to say that anything is bad or good. It's just your opinion because you don't have any objective morality. Now, this does not deal with the problems that the atheist brings up about the moral argument. This is just a way for the Christian to try to get out of it by being the loudest accuser. It's their way of saying, I know you are, but what am I? It is truly that childish. I've dealt with the objective, with the moral argument many, many times. Hopefully I will do it another 10 times before this year is over. I love flogging it. And I love the fact that no one can stand up and defend it. Not really. It's an indefensible kind of thing. And so this is Keller reaching into that bag to try to save him here. And he's saying, hey, Martin Luther King, it's not me, it's him. I really hate the use of citations in this type of argument because it's not necessary. You don't need to allude to what someone else said. You just need to state your opinion. Okay, I'm not debating Martin Luther King. He's dead. He's also dead wrong about many things, but sure, okay, it's dumb. I don't need some objective suffering to know that my suffering is bad. I don't care. Because one of the things that the Christian wants to do is say, you don't know when suffering is really suffering. You don't know when bad is really bad. All you have is your opinion. So you don't have any objective measurement for what is actual suffering and not suffering, what is actually bad and not bad. Now, what the Christian does not supply here is their idea of what objective suffering actually is, what bad actually is. They just want to say, well, you don't have an objective measure of suffering and bad, so I win. Bye. It is an extremely disingenuous argument, and it is an extremely bad use of the social man idea. It's the idea that you have a broken idea of suffering, and so you don't even get to complain. And it is saying that loudly and never providing a better idea of what suffering and bad is. It's something that is done always, every time, in bad faith. Do not let anyone get away with it, even if they say, well, Confucius said.
Otherwise, what you've got out there is the strong eat the weak. That's how you and I got here. There's no God. You and I came here through stronger organisms eating the weak organism, natural selection. That's what life's about.
Stop. Nature is truly red in tooth and claw, but that's not the whole story. That's not the whole story. To shrink it down to just that, it's either God or dog eat dog. You are either stupid or you're a liar. There are no other options. Okay? Try that for a dichotomy. Okay? Because the idea that the only choices I have are believe in God, which doesn't help, by the way, because it still doesn't answer any of the questions about suffering, or accept it's just dog eat dog, is dumb. That is not, in fact, how social creatures operate. All right? If we're just talking about cells, there may be some element of truth in that. We're talking about people and animals who have complex social structures. We are social creatures. And if the only thing that we were in nature is dog eat dog, there would be no dogs left. All right? We would all be dead. All social creatures, all social structures would break down, would have done so tens of thousands of years ago. Okay? The fact that we're still here and that we build successful communities and raise our kids generation after generation after generation, and that we become more and more connected and dependent on a worldwide basis than before, suggests exactly the opposite from what this fool is saying. There actually is something else going on in social evolution, always has been, which is why certain social traits survive and get passed on, and certain antisocial traits do not. And the population is still growing, and so are societies, but at a grander and grander level with every generation. But he knows that. He's not stupid. He's lying. And he's doing that because his audience, he's talking to an audience where he assumes that they are stupid. And they will just lap it up uncritically. It's either God or, strong man survives. And this is why I have lost respect for Tim Keller.
That's utterly natural.
That's utterly bullshit.
Now, deep in our hearts, we feel, no, that's not right. But, the question is why. Now,
actually, in our brains that study, we don't feel that it's not right. We actually know that what you're saying is not right. You goddamn lying fool.
what Martin Luther King Jr. was saying is we
Stop quoting Martin Luther King Jr. You obviously don't know the first thing about the man.
believe that strong eating the weak is unjust and wrong because there's a higher law. If there was no higher law, he says, how do you even really justify your outrage?
And yet the strong eat the weak every single day.
Hang on, I just want to step back for just a second before we get to this point. How do you justify your outrage? Who the hell are you to referee my outrage and determine that I do not have a right to my moral outrage or my outrage over unjust suffering, over unjust, undue pain that I have to endure, that people that I know and love have to endure, that I have no right to it? Because if I don't have a objective foundation that agrees with yours, that I have no right, that I simply have to roll over like a bug and just take it. You goddamn fool. Who do you think you are?
You can really justify your outrage.
And yet the strong eat the weak every single day.
Yes.
So why doesn't God intervene and say, you know what? You can't kill all those people. Stop it.
Well, I said there were two responses. The first response only is
The first response is just bullshit. What was the next one?
that it doesn't make it any easier. I mean, it really doesn't, because now, on what basis am I morally outraged?
Again, we don't need you to have some kind of refereeing, judging position over the basis of my outrage. On what basis do you think you can judge anyone's outrage? You suggest that if it's just nature, that we have no right to outrage. But if it's just nature, if I am wrong about all of my assumptions, I still have a right to be upset over suffering that I have to do. And you have no foundation to suggest I don't. You superior, smug, elitist asshole. What the actual fuck?
Strong eating the weak is natural. So what? So they did it. Stronger nations eat weaker nations.
And this is, don't worry, my blood pressure's fine. And this is how you, again, dodge the question, try to get the table turned and ignore the actual question, the actual problem. Because the question is not, how does someone without God deal with suffering? We have answers for that. We can talk about them. I might talk about some of them here in just a moment. The question is, how do you explain suffering under your worldview where there's a God? Now, the way you explain that, if you're a dishonest Christian, is to just try to ignore the question and make it a problem for the atheist, as if it were the same thing. This is a false equivalency once again. Same thing. So if, let's see, I could grant, because I am the great granter, I can grant that there's nothing more to the world than brutality, and that there are no social restraints in nature that would say that something is right or wrong for social creatures. Let's just grant all of that is bullshit, but let's grant it. I would still just say, okay, that's what we would expect. That's what we would expect without a God. We would expect the world we live in right now, the dog-eat-dog world, is exactly the world we expect when there's no explanation for suffering other than that's just the way nature is. Great. You still haven't answered the question. And you haven't pointed out a problem for me. Because I could take that on. I don't buy it for a moment. I just want to make that clear. But I can grant it. It's meaningless whether I grant it or not. It's meaningless whether it's true or not. And we could just say, yeah, that's the world. That's the way the world works without a God. That doesn't help you explain why the world works exactly like this with a God.
Stronger individuals. So what's the big deal? What's the problem? I mean, that's fair. I mean,
it's not.
I mean, that's not a complete answer, but it's fair.
It's not any answer.
To say, yeah, now as an atheist, now how am I dealing with evil and suffering? Now,
hey, excuse me. As an atheist, how do I deal with evil and suffering? Let's just set evil aside for a moment. Actually separate the problems of suffering, the problems of evil, but some people put them together. That's fine. How do we address that? Well, we address it by feeling strongly that a wrong has been done. And we find other people who agree with that. And we negotiate with yet other people, and try our best to sway them, to convince them that we are correct and have them take on our opinion. That's what negotiation is, okay? And we do that until we have enough support so that, like with slavery, even though the Christian God never said it was wrong, enough people said, you know what, I think that's wrong. We should stop it. And a lot of Christians said, no, you shouldn't. And we'll fight you. And we said, we think we've got enough of us. Let's do it. Let's go. And thank Cthulhu, we had enough of us. And now we have no slavery. That's what we do. We like to do it without the war. The Christian makes that necessary. We like to do it with reason, but we're dealing in a lot of cases with people who are not reasoning. But that's how we do it. That's what we do. We campaign politically. We sometimes have to cash out some social capital in order to campaign for what we believe in. And we march. And sometimes we're persecuted. It happens. Sometimes the only way to fight is to get punched in the face enough times until enough people say, wait a minute, that's not right. Until people start to listen. There are all kinds of things that we do actively to deal with the injustice of suffering. And you know why we can do it? Because we can say that seems wrong and someone should do something about it. You, the Christian, you're the one who can't say that unless you find yourself on the wrong side of your God. We might have more to say about that later.
I really have only a visceral reaction to it. I don't even have a real cogent warrant for saying this is absolutely got to stop, other than I don't like it. Okay,
now we'll do this now. Yeah, I don't like it. It all starts with I don't like it. Every change, every social change that we have ever had has started by seeing an injustice in someone saying, I don't like it. Until we get enough of a chorus of people who also don't like it to gain enough power to do something about it. The Christian, they're too cowardly to say, I don't like it, because they are afraid that they might be saying that they don't like something that their God has ordained. Because they know that their God is overseeing the suffering. They've read their Bible. Some of them, people at Keller's level, have read their Bible. They know for a fact that their God causes the suffering in many cases, doesn't just allow it. Although, boy, I can talk for an hour about the evil of allowing suffering. You're not actually doing yourself any favors by insisting, no, he doesn't cause it, he allows it. There's plenty that he causes. And so when you see suffering, when a Christian sees suffering, they can't just say, I don't like it. They got to check and make sure that it's something that God doesn't like and that they can blame it on somebody else. And then they can say they don't like it. But for ages, they couldn't say about slavery, I don't like it, because nowhere in the Bible does God suggest a thing like that. So people who didn't give a damn what God thought had to say, I don't like it. Okay, we got to go the long way around to make these things happen. But the one who is not tied to a God is free to say, I like that, or I don't like that. The one who's tied to a God can't say that out of fear for so many things. And so they can't do anything. They can say, well, I'll just pray for it. I'll pray for it. We'll see what God does or doesn't do, but I've done my part. I've prayed for it. God, but I might be wrong. Your will be done. And the skeptic is brave enough to say, God, damn you.
The second is, now you were raised, you went to Catholic school. The Christian view of God is very different than the other views of God, because the Christian view of God is that God came into this world and suffered. Now, I have a cat, and my wife and I love our cat, and we actually saw it once. We broke its leg by accident, but we fixed it for only $1,000, which we never in a million years would have thought we would ever do for a cat. But
well, you broke it, so
we broke the cat.
You're kind of morally obligated.
And it suffered. However, I think it's fair to say, because it doesn't have the same kind of self-consciousness, I would say that a human being suffering is probably at least sort of some kind of higher order.
Okay, I'm gonna have to stop you there. You remember the monster William Lane Craig, the addle-brained William Lane Craig, who used to proudly say, I don't know if he still does or not, animals don't suffer. It's easy to find on YouTube. It's not out of context, folks. I've listened to him for years and years and years. He is batshit crazy. I can't believe I used to respect him. Animals don't suffer. They don't feel pain. You fool. Obviously, you have never done a moment of animal husbandry. You've never had a pet. You've never seen animals either in the wild or in the domestic wild of our urban settlements. Animals absolutely suffer terribly, and sometimes for a long time before they die. You can hear it in the screams. They're not just pantomiming suffering. They're suffering. They're in pain. You can see them try to protect an injured limb. You can see them as they try to move on with their lives, as they wince through pain that they cannot understand and cannot do anything about. Oh, they suffer. So at least you're not going the full Craig. So we don't have to roll out the funny jacket in the rubber room just yet. But you still have to take the position, a very Christian position, I might add, that animals don't suffer as much. I mean, they're not like humans. It's not that kind of suffering, different order of suffering. It's not. The reason why they have to do that, the reason why this is a particularly Christian, maybe even Jewish idea, is because of all of the animal suffering inflicted in the name of this God, and that God has inflicted on animal kind. And so rather than dealing with the problem of suffering, they have come up with a lie that they can tell themselves, well, animals don't really suffer. It's not on the same level. It's kind of suffering. It's not really shut up. Monsters. Yeah, animals suffer, but tell me before we get off this subject, Mr. Keller, how much suffering counts as suffering? How much? How much do you need to suffer before it's undue suffering? How much? How much self-awareness, self-consciousness do you need to have before suffering is suffering in your book? Well, it's not as much as human suffering. Well, it is, but it's not as much as human suffering. It's not the same kind. Great. What kind? How close to human suffering does it have to get? Is human suffering the only kind of suffering in the world that matters? And that anything less than human suffering is not suffering? What if you're severely mentally retarded? I've known a lot of people. Having one handicap is kind of rare. They often come in bunches, and I'm very familiar with the handicap community, having grown up with them and worked with them in my adulthood. Those people, they're not as self-aware, self-conscious as you, right? So their suffering, does that count? But they're human. They're magically human. They got this magical quality about them. It doesn't matter. What about vegetable? People who are in a vegetative state. Is that suffering? Does that count? Does that matter? They're human. See, so if you're going to start saying, well, that animal or this animal, they can't really suffer as much because of this, that, you've got to get real specific. Because you're going to hang yourself in the end. Not every human is on the same level. And by that measure, not every human can suffer either. In fact, that's exactly, now that I think about it, exactly the reasoning of white supremacists that made black slavery possible.
You're more aware of things. There's more agony than a. If God really came to earth in Jesus Christ, then and the suffering he went through on the cross voluntarily would have been far beyond my suffering. Now, what does that do?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. What was that? What? Jesus suffering because he's God would be worse on some order of magnitude than your suffering? How do you show me the math on that? Okay, because when I do the math, I come out with exactly the opposite conclusion. So let's see. Let's work this out. So I've got some bit of personal experience. When I was a child, and a bigger, stronger, meaner child hit me, that caused me a great deal of suffering. Okay, but when I grew up, that same meaner, stronger child, have to be a different person, but that person at that same level of childhood, they could hit me and I wouldn't feel it. Because I'm grown up. I'm bigger and stronger and more resilient. And my jaw is made of iron because I've been through the wars, good sir. And I'm hardened in a way that makes me harder to hurt than someone who has not been so hardened. I played football. I love football. Football should be outlawed. But I played football. Let me tell you, you are going to get hurt on the football field. Even if you just play one play. You're wearing the pads. When you smash those pads with all your might against someone else who's wearing those pads and they smash against you with all their might, you're going to come home bloody just from micro cuts from the pads. All right? At some point, you stop feeling that. You don't even feel it anymore. The soreness that you would get at practice, your first practice, oh man, is that hell. At some point, an example of belly flop. You run for a little bit and then you jump and you spread your arms and legs and you plop out your belly and you smash it directly into the ground. No hands, no feet. It's a belly flop. That will put you down for several minutes the first time you do it. It is such insanity. But you're expected to not only get up, but do it again. Smash, and then again, smash, and then again, smash, and then again, smash. Okay? The kind of training that you go through for some of these sports is cruelty almost beyond measure. But you know what? After several weeks of training like that, belly flop is nothing. It's nothing. You got abs of steel. So if someone comes up to you, even a fairly big muscular fellow, and punches you in the belly with all their might, they're going to hurt their hand. They're not going to hurt you because you are stronger and far more developed. So let's see how that maths out. God versus us. We try to hurt God's feelings. Does his feelings get hurt as easily as ours? Because you can hurt my feelings. You can make me cry with words. I can feel things. I'm an emotional being. I can be butthurt. Can God? Can God? What kind of God do you worship? It's insane to believe that he can get his feelings hurt because of something I say on a podcast. If your God can get his feelings hurt by something I can say on a podcast, you should worship me and not him. You're worshiping the wrong God. And likewise, if you nail me to a cross, you drive a nail in my hand, don't even worry about the other nails. One nail. I'm down for weeks. What are you talking about? That's it. So you take a God, even if he's wearing a fake human suit, he shouldn't even know that the nail has been driven in his hand. What are you talking about? You can't possibly hurt a God. If you can hurt a God, he ain't no God. And any God that you can kill, you probably should kill. Because he's not really a God at all. He's just a pretender who is trying to take some freedom away from you. Yeah, if you can kill him, murderize that bastard. So, right, Jesus, you've walked into the wrong neighborhood because it turns out you're not actually a God after all. I wouldn't kill Jesus if I saw him. He's just a dude, some crazy dude with some ideas of grandeur and glory. I meet those all the time. So that doesn't really mean anything to me. But if he was a God, the idea that you could make him suffer at all, or that his suffering, that anything that you do to this God would somehow create more suffering rather than less, is laughably absurd to me. There's nothing that I could do to a God. I can't punch him in the face with a hammer and make him even notice that I was there.
It is not, even after you believe that God would have come down and become vulnerable to suffering and death, that does not yet give us an answer to the question of what the reason is that God allows evil and suffering. But it does tell us what the reason isn't. It can't be that he doesn't love us, or he wouldn't have come down and gotten involved.
Okay. This is taking too long. And this one, it's so obviously stupid. I don't even want to stop and talk about it, except Christians keep saying it. And some of you may not have heard it rebutted properly. I've had more surgeries than most human beings have had and lived. So, very interesting that. When I get rushed into an emergency room because my leg is crushed, I've got to do some kind of emergency thing to keep that from becoming something far worse. I do not want a doctor to see me and empathize with me and then go outside and step in front of a car and get his leg crushed so that I can know that the doctor loves me. What the actual fuck are you talking about? I don't even need a doctor who loves me. I don't need a doctor who likes me. I need a doctor who's good. I want him to have 2 good legs and 2 good arms and 2 good eyes. I want him to be the best, the top at his peak when he sees me. He can hate me. He can be a racist. I don't care what he is. I need him to fix me. I don't need him to empathize with me. I especially don't need him to suffer with me. What good is a suffering doctor that at the end of the day leaves you still suffering and him getting more pain? How did that help you? How did that show any love for you at all? He got more pain. You're going to die of suffering. Okay? So Jesus, he comes to earth. And because he so loves us and because he's so moved by our suffering, he decides, I'm going to jump in front of a car too, just to suffer with you, to show you that I love you. Except I'm not going to stick around for long. I'm not going to really suffer. And by the way, when this weekend is over, I'm king shit. And you're still suffering. And you're going to tell me that means that God cares about my suffering. That actually shows the opposite. Because you know what he didn't do? He didn't do shit for my suffering. I'm still suffering, but he has more power than ever. What a stupid argument.
It can't be that he doesn't care or he wouldn't be involved. I don't know what the reason is he hasn't stopped it yet, but it can't be a lack of, it can't be a remoteness, it can't be indifference, or he wouldn't have come and gotten down involved. Now that assumes you believe the gospel.
What? We're talking to atheists, aren't we? Your interlocutor here, David, he's an atheist. He doesn't believe in what it did it for him. Remember, it was the Holocaust, okay? And now what Tim Keller is saying, I don't have any real answers, but it can't be that. If you believe the Gospels, Of course we don't believe the Gospels, you goddamn fool. What are you talking
If you
about?
believe the gospel, what it does is it keeps off the idea of indifference and says, I don't know why he hasn't stopped evil and suffering. But whatever the reason is, it can't just be indifference, hardness of heart, or lack of
Well,
love.
have you thought about it in terms of, the reason?
I mean,
Why didn't he come down and stop the Holocaust?
I don't know. But now,
All right.
at this point,
At this point, I'm just going to dodge completely. I'm going to put it all on you, and then I'm going to run.
you've got to ask yourself a question. If you can't think of a reason, does that mean there really can't be one?
Okay. Just remember that question, because after he goes into his long little stupid story here, that's what we're going to come back to. If you can't think of a reason, does that mean there isn't one? This is also one of the worst ways of dealing with the problem of suffering, and Christians do this all the time, as if they think they've got a trump card, as if they think they've got some kind of defeater. Some of them literally say, you don't know everything. If you don't know everything, then there's a chance there might be some good reason, and you just don't know it. So you just have to assume that there's a good reason that you don't know. Let's run this out here.
That's the Alvin Plantinga.
Right.
Have you heard the no-seums? Oh, this is good. You'll like this. Okay.
Lay it on me.
All right. Well, now, you're an academic, so you realize philosophers talk like this. Neither of us are really philosophers, but you do know how they talk.
I do indeed.
Okay. He says, if you look into a pup tent and I ask you, do you see any St. Bernards? And if you don't see any St. Bernards, you say, no, I don't see any St. Bernards, then we can safely conclude there probably are no St. Bernards in the tent, because if there were a St. Bernard in the tent, you'd probably see it. But he said, if you look into a pup tent and I say, do you see any no-see-ums? Now, no-see-ums, if you live near the Great Lakes, are little gnats that are so small they come through the screen and bite you anyway. And he says, so if you look into the pup tent and I say, do you see any no-see-ums? And you say, no, I don't see any see-ums. I don't see any no-see-ums. That doesn't mean that there aren't any no-see-ums in there, because if there were, you couldn't see them. And he says, now, when you say, because I can't think of any good reason why God would continue to allow evil and suffering to happen, therefore there can't be one, you're assuming that whatever reasons there would be more like St. Bernards than no-see-ums. Well, why should it be? I mean, he says this is probably cold comfort. Without the gospel of Jesus Christ coming into the earth and coming alongside of us,
Which we don't believe.
it's cold comfort. But what he's saying is you can't assume that just because you can't think of a good reason why God hasn't stopped it yet, there can't be any. And then the gospel says, well, whatever that reason would be, it can't be a lack of love.
Okay. All right. Can't be a lack of love. Hopefully I've shown it actually can be a lack of love. So it's just a non sequitur to say that Jesus suffered, and so it can't be a lack of love, because that begs us to examine the suffering of Jesus. And as it turns out, not so much, and he had much to gain. And he still left us here. He didn't stay with us and suffer with us. He went to heaven. We're still here. We still get to die in fires that we didn't start. Right? So no, it doesn't mean that it's love. And even if it was love, it wouldn't matter. You want to hope that I'm right and that Tim Keller's wrong. Because if God gave his best shot, he blew his best shot right there, and it had no effect on suffering, then you are hosed. You have no hope. You are without hope, because your one protector can do nothing about suffering. If I'm right and God's just a son of a bitch, he could do something about suffering, and maybe will. Okay, there's hope for you if God is an evil bastard. Because he might just smile upon you. He's capricious. But if he's doing the best he can, you're fucked. Okay, as far as the no-see-ums go, all right. God, it's so dumb. I feel dumb having to address it. I feel like I get dumber when I have to address this type of Christian sophistry. But okay, here we go. Let's use our own analogy. You are a social worker. You work in the Department of Health and Human Services in America. That covers a lot of things, but it would also cover things like child protection. So you here, in fact, you know of a child, and many calls have been made anonymously. You know of a child that is being badly abused. And I'll let you decide what kind of abuse is badly abused, since I'm an atheist and I don't know what's really bad. The child is being badly abused by whatever definition you use as bad. And you can just figure out that. And you know it's happening. All right? However, the family, the couple, they're married couple, they've been married for 10 years. They go to church. They give to charity. You know, they're on the school board. Good model citizens. Except they've been abusing their kids. All right, but as a social worker, if you're a Christian going with the no-see-ums argument, you're thinking, I just don't understand the abuse. Maybe it's not real abuse. You know, maybe I'm wrong about what abuse is. Or maybe there's a good reason for the abuse. You know, those parents, they come out tired. They come out with cuts and bruises every time they beat their child. I mean, they're very athletic about it. Look at how much they're suffering. So the parents are suffering too. It can't be a lack of love. And I just can't come up with a good reason why they would be doing it. But just because I can't come up with a good reason why they're beating their child, it doesn't mean they don't have one. Right? It doesn't mean they don't have a good reason. Sure, they might actually have a good reason. Right? And so the judgment you make is, just because I can't come up with a good reason, it doesn't mean they don't have one. And so I am going to do nothing about the abuse. That is exactly the wrong way around. What you should say, first of all, you shouldn't even be asking about the reasons. You should go in and do your goddamn job and protect the child. That's what you should do. You should care about the suffering of that child and put all of your might behind the well-being of that child. And so if you were thinking about the well-being and the reasons of the abuser, at that moment, you are doing the wrong thing. That is not your job. There are other people to think of that. Your job is to protect the child, not to examine or understand the motives of the one doing the beating. But you examine it anyway because, you know, the beatings are bad and you're thinking, man, I just can't come up with the reason. What you should do, once you acknowledge to yourself that you, as a protector of this child, cannot come up with a good reason for these horrible beatings, you should step in, take the child, and protect the child. And the courts can sort out the reasons and make a final judgment on whether the child goes back to the family or whether they don't. Your job as a protector is to protect the child. And to hell with whatever the good Christian parents think their good reason is. And so, the same with your God. I don't give a good goddamn what his reasons are at this point. I don't care. Maybe his reasons are he just gets off on seeing people suffer. And the more they suffer, if they continue to praise him, that just gives him the good feeling. That's the good stuff right there. They can be like a Job, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. That's the good stuff. Maybe that's his reason. I don't give a shit what his reason is. What I care about is the suffering. And I know that if we're dealing with a God, we're not dealing with a God with limitations. Nature has limitations. As a part of nature, and not the strongest parts of nature, we have limitations. There's only so much we can do to alleviate suffering, and we do it. Every bit of it we can. A lot of Christians like to make the false comparison of, well, you got to take your child to the doctor. They gotta pull that tooth. We all know that the anesthesia is not enough and it hurts like hell. They got to do it. They got to give the child a shot. It's going to be a painful shot. The medicine is a painful thing. There's going to be screaming. But you know what's wrong with that analogy? As humans, there's nothing we can do about it. We're already doing the best we can. We are making better and better pain reliever so that we can perform those types of operations without having to knock a person all the way out, because that full anesthesia, that has some effects. And so if we can make better pain relief, we will, and we do, because pain is bad, even when applied to our good. Absolutely. When we give a shot, the nurses, what do you call them? The people who give the shots, I can't remember the word now. They train, and part of their training is to do everything they can, not just to give the shot and draw the blood or insert the medicine, is to do it as pain-free as possible. They're not trying to just jab the needle in and do the thing. They are doing everything in their power to alleviate pain. And when we have the technology to give medicine or draw blood without having to stick a needle in somebody, we will do it. And we're working toward it. So don't tell me that somehow your God giving us suffering is analogous to that, because he already can insert the medicine without the needle. He doesn't need the pain. He doesn't need the suffering. And he doesn't seem to be doing anything to try to alleviate it. We're doing the best we can. So at the end of the day, I don't care what his reasons are, because I'm not bound to believe, to have faith, some kind of blind ass faith that his reasons are going to be good. I mean, it seems bad. It's bad for everybody. Suffering is bad for everybody. But we just, by faith, say, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. I won't. Screw that. I'm way out of that. You don't get more cult brain than that. And you should stop caring about his reasons also. What you should care about is protecting your child and your spouse and your family and your community from all of the undue suffering that this God has us going through. He can have his reasons. I'm going to fight it every step of the way. Because as a human living this life, I also have reasons to not suffer. And you can examine my reasons. You can't examine his. This is enough. This is enough. Fun series. skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com. Log your Discuss account. Discuss away. Send me an email. skepticsandseekers@gmail.com. Until next time, I'll see you in the comments. And in the meantime, I'm out. and I hope I can take many of you with me.
For more information about the Veritas Forum, including additional recordings and a calendar of upcoming events,
Yeah.